Welcome to the IT Career Energizer podcast. For anyone who wants to build and grow a career in IT, develop and improve your strengths and skills, be inspired and motivated by the successes of others, manage your career progression, and achieve your IT career goals. And now, your host, Phil Burgess.
Welcome to episode 317 of the IT Career Energizer podcast. My guest on today's show is the Chief Technical Officer at ThingLogix, a provider of Internet of Things solutions, solution components, and advisory services. He has been actively involved in technology for nearly 30 years, including now what is known as Amazon's AWS IoT. As CTO of ThingLogix, he is the chief architect behind the company's groundbreaking IoT platform that eliminates the need for code. So it's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast, Rob Rastovich.
Thanks, Phil. Thanks for having us on. I appreciate it.
Rob, obviously, Internet of Things is the focus of you and your company. Could you perhaps give us a bit of an understanding of really what that term means? Because I think there's a lot of confusion when we talk about the Internet of Things. It'd be good to get a sort of a clear view from you of what that means, in particularly from your company's perspective.
Yeah, it is a broad term, and I think everybody kind of hopped on the term a few years ago, and it seems like everything is now IoT. Everything from a business analytics application to firmware to cloud services, anything that we use that term quite loosely. But essentially, at the end of the day, what IoT is connecting things to the internet. So I guess the classic example is I can now have my refrigerator connected to the internet and send messages to vendors and stuff like that. Now, the question, we won't debate it here, is the logic or the wisdom of connecting your refrigerator, but it is connecting things that typically weren't connected before. So when the internet first started, right, we all got connected. We all started sending emails. We learned about websites. We learned about e-commerce. We could now talk to each other. We could send messages back and forth via, chat now and email, and we could do FTPs, and we could move files back and forth and all those kinds of things. We were connected, if you will. So the Internet of Things is now allowing devices, things, to do the same thing, send us messages. So the best example is really like a temperature sensor. Like I have, and we've all seen those, the Nest temperature sensor, or the thermostat that's there. I have a temperature sensor that can now, it doesn't send a lot. It's connected. It doesn't say very much. All it says is, it's 76 degrees. It's 76 degrees. It's now 77 degrees. So it's not a very interesting connection, but being able to take that data that comes from that particular sensor and then combine that with your connected thermostat, you can now start to make smart things. So once things start talking to each other, you can now add intelligence onto it. And really, that's where ThingLogix actually came about. We were a startup company called Telemetry, and we were trying to create a piece of software that, as you can imagine, once something starts connecting, if you connect one thing, that doesn't take a lot. But if you connect 1 million of those or 1 billion of those, that requires a whole different set of, infrastructure and hardware and different, things to manage all that. So we built that system back in 10 or 11, and then ultimately sold that to Amazon, and that is today what is called the Amazon IoT. So essentially now all these little devices you can connect, and they will be able to talk. And sometimes I always call it conversation, being able to talk to things just like you talk to other people via your internet connection.
Yeah, great. Thank you for that. That's really helpful to get a bit of a sort of context, if you like, about what IoT really means. So good. Rob, can you maybe give us a career tip, one that the audience may not be aware of and perhaps should be?
Yeah, that's always a good question. And it seems like, I've gone through many iterations of my career from, I actually didn't start as a programmer. Actually started in marketing, and then once the internet came around, I kind of got the bug, and started learning to program, and I became a Java programmer and moved all the way up. I guess the one thing that has been constant, as I thought about your question prior, the one thing that has always been constant is the need to constantly be learning. The thing with our industry is it's never the same. And there's new technologies. I mean, when I started, we had HTML, and we had, some Perl scripts back in the day where we would have to learn to write Perl. Well, that gave way to more, PHP, and then the .NET stuff, and then Java, and I remember having to make that decision one day: do I learn Java or do I learn .NET? Because I just didn't have the capacity to learn both of them. And every time there's a new technology, it's the ability to learn and to absorb quickly. So, and that's one of the things that I would say that um, college was really about. Now, I know college has a lot of, subject matter expertise. Yes, you learned what an if-then statement is and all that. But one thing I learned in there was it wasn't. And I remember sitting in class and going, I'm trying to learn this subject, but what I really got to figure out is what is important to the professor as opposed to what is actually important in the subject matter. And that ability to kind of discern and learn and absorb quickly has been really a cornerstone for me, because as new technologies come out, you got to get on, you got to pick them up quickly. So, and I think that's actually a skill that you learn, is how to learn.
It is. And I think you touched on something as well about learning what was relevant to your professor is interesting.
Yeah.
So you had learning with a purpose, and you had
Mhm.
a particular, I suppose, direction in terms of the way you approached it.
We did, and I remember, and I've done this through my consulting career. That really has done well for me as well, because a lot of times I will go into an organization, and whether it's an IoT solution, whether it was I did Salesforce for a number of years. I've done all kinds of technology consulting, and that's one of the skills when I get guys out of college. They a lot of times they have the hard skills, like these guys coming out of college these days can write code faster than I can type an email. But that soft skill of learning to actually be able to understand what the client needs, what it is that they want, understand what their problem is. I always say that I don't have, there's always somebody smarter than me. I always assume I'm the dumbest guy in the room. And I always know that, there's always somebody there that can do something faster, better, and quicker than I can. And I figured out that I have one marketable skill in the consulting world. And it's that I make people feel comfortable. And that ability it's a learned skill over time to be able to understand, empathize, and then be able to understand what they think is important. And it's amazing what happens when a customer, or I don't, you can do it in your relationships or whatever, when somebody feels like they're understood, like when a client feels like you understand my need, it's, there's this big sigh, there's this big relief, and now it's just a matter of what I call typing, right? I understand what you need, and now we just got to do the typing.
Exactly. Yeah. Good. Okay. Rob, can you tell us about your worst IT career moment and what you learned from that experience?
Oh, there's so many. uh, um, I would say um, every IT guy has had that. I don't know. It is a lump in the throat. Your stomach just melts, and it's when you realize you have lost data, you have lost code. You didn't back something up. You didn't. The client comes up and says we just deleted everything. And I had one time, I was working at this company, and we were doing actually it was desktop publishing or something, and there was a big server sitting at the front of the room, and that server back in those days, we had, I don't know, 7 gigs attached to the server. It was a big deal, right? And it had a bunch of images on it because I was helping them automate their catalog production. And there's a big room, people busy around, moving about, and the server was sitting in the middle of the room, and there was a dialog box up on the server that just said yes or no, and I just went up and I hit return and said okay, that's it, and all of a sudden everything disappeared. All 7 gigs. Apparently somebody before me inadvertently hit the keys that hit select all and hit delete, and they didn't hit the confirmation button, and there was this dialog box sitting up there, and I needed to use the server, and I thought, well, I'll just hit it. So I hit okay, confirm. And so after that day, I have never nonchalantly hit an okay on a dialog box.
Yeah, always worth knowing what you're okaying or accepting, isn't it?
Yeah, as it is. But I remember, your heart just drops into your stomach.
I
Like, oh,
bet. Exactly, yes.
yeah.
So maybe something a little bit more positive. Can you tell us about your career highlights so far?
I'd have to say that was the Amazon acquisition. That was definitely a highlight. There was a bunch of us that were working together, and we were doing Salesforce consulting, and so we decided, this back then we were calling it machine to machine, not IoT. And I remember the first time I saw an MQTT feed, and I saw data flowing through, and I thought that is just the coolest thing. And we hooked up a car, and we could, as we're driving in the car, we could have a web app that showed us the speed. Now there's another useless thing, right? Being able to see the speed of a car that you're in when there's a speedometer right in front of you, right? But it was just the whole idea that, oh my gosh, we have this device that's connected, it's sending data to the internet, and we have an application that we're looking at that coming down. We starved for 3 or 4 years there. It was, startups are tough. It's a very, very difficult road, and there are startup people, and then there are corporate people, and I think the two shall never meet. But it was a tough road, and then the story of how we got acquired, we were actually trying to sell our technology to Salesforce, and in order to prove out our system, we had to spin up this huge emulation of, you just can imagine somebody saying, okay, well, I need you to prove to me that you can have 1 million simultaneous connections over a period of a week or something. So the infrastructure that we had to use to, do that, plus the infrastructure we had to spin up in order to simulate 1 million users was pretty significant at the time. So we spun up all these EC2 instances, and we were trying to get this thing to work, and actually got a call from Amazon and says, what are you guys doing? And please stop that. And that's what opened the discussions, and they ultimately ended up acquiring us.
Yeah, that's a good story. Yes.
Yeah, definitely. That was definitely a highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. And what excites you about the future? So obviously technology is evolving all the time. Is there anything that particularly grabs your attention, or you feel that's, where your interest lies, or could be the next big thing?
Well, and that's, I've kind of spent my career trying to find the next big thing. In fact, I remember, I built my first e-commerce site in like the early 90s, and by 1998, things are really starting to move on there. I remember I built a build your own website application, and thought, well, no one ever be using that. And I remember I'm actually, in addition to being CTO of ThingLogix, I'm also a cattle rancher. So I live on a ranch in Central Oregon. And I remember one day I was out in the field, and I was, had been working and doing consulting for the last, 5 or 6 years. And I remember always thinking that, I'm always behind the curve. I'm always just missing it. I always wanted to be ahead. So I remember I was out in the field, and I remember I said, okay, if you're so damn smart, Rob, then what do you think is the next big thing? What is it that's coming? And without a shadow of a doubt, I thought, it's IoT. It's connecting those devices. Well, I think I don't know if I was right or just reading the signs correctly, but we were early. And there's problems with being early. So, and I always say, even at ThingLogix, we have designed a solution for a problem that most people don't know they have yet. So we're just kind of waiting for people to have the problem.
That's the balance, isn't it, between being early and too
It
early?
is, and that is also one of the things that I've, in my later years now, have realized that being on the cutting edge or the bleeding edge is kind of fun and exciting, but it's not as profitable as being right behind that and into
Yeah.
kind of that sweet spot. But what excites me for IT in the future is really the disappearing of the laptop and the computer and the browser. And I want to, 3 or 5 years from now, you and I will have this conversation, and we'll say, you remember we used to spin up a browser, and and my other kids are going to go, what's a browser and why did you do that? You mean you had to go to a computer? And the internet is going to, like, disappear, or at the same time become ubiquitous everywhere. It started with Alexa and Google Home and these kinds of things, where we can now interact with connectivity without going to www anything, right?
Yeah.
Our phones are starting to connect that way, and now as devices start to connect that way, things are just going to kind of disappear, and we won't really need, I hope email dies a very quick death, because I think that's also an antiquated technology. I can't stand email.
Yeah.
But I think it's going to start to disappear, and we're going to start getting more, hologram technology. I think is pretty exciting. AR and VR technologies are very exciting. Those kinds of interfaces where we can now interact with the world because of our devices are connected, and now these new UIs are going to give us a whole different experience of what connecting between people and things are going to be.
Yeah. I think that's a conversation we could have for a whole episode about the future
Oh,
and what,
indeed.
what it
Oh,
holds.
indeed.
But
Yeah.
I want to move into the reveal round now. We're going to find out a little bit more about you and the way you think. You ready for this?
Sure.
So, what first attracted you to a career in IT?
I call it the crack cocaine of coding. It's basically Hello World, right? I remember writing, Java came out, and I was trying to figure out what this all meant. And I remember writing a web page that a simple add to basket and display a product, add it to the basket. And I did it. And once you see it working, that's like, oh, I want to do some more. I want to do some more.
Yeah,
And then when you see other people using stuff that you created, then that becomes the hook. Like, you just can't get enough from that. So
exactly.
it's that first kind of, oh my God, look what I did. And I had the similar experience in IoT one time. I was trying to, at way back, I was trying to make an Arduino have a light turn on from my computer, and I had all this stuff, and I was soldering stuff. I was at the kitchen table, and I finally had turned the light on, and I showed my wife. I go, look, I can turn that light on, and she's like, "You're going to clean all this up, aren't you?" Yeah. Not everybody's attracted to it, but that's the um, the thing that keeps you coming back.
Yes, yeah. What is the best career advice you've ever received?
That's a good question. I think the best career advice that someone ever gave me. I think that had to be, and the thing that always kind of drives me, and I don't remember who the guy was. It was a motivational speech, and I was trying to. I come from, my family were ranchers and whatnot, so they had nothing to do with IT, and becoming an entrepreneur was definitely not within our wheelhouse. But I remember one guy said, and it's a common saying, you hear it many times. Shoot for the stars, and if you miss, you land up on the moon. And I remember, that is a double-edged sword. If you're going to shoot, if you're going to always be swinging for the fence, it's not an actually comfortable place to be sometimes. But I will say that, when I'm 90 years old and sitting on the porch, I won't be going, I wish I had tried. I wish I had tried. I tried it all.
Yeah, yeah, no regrets. And conversely, what is the worst career advice you've ever received?
Don't worry, we're going to go IPO and we'll pay you then. Um, was the worst career. And we had, I had built in the late 90s, I actually built, and I still have it today, a travel engine for a company. And, because back then everybody was going IPO, everybody's going to go IPO. And they'd say, all right, well, we'll give you 1 million shares. And I go, okay, this is going to be great. I actually built it. It went IPO. It was a travel company. It went IPO in January of 2001, and I could start selling in September 15th of 2001. Well, on September 11th, 2001, the travel industry all went
Yep.
away, and so that was all for naught. I ended up keeping the code, but it's always difficult to do. So I continue to do it, but I think it's the worst advice is don't worry, we'll pay you on the back end.
Yes. And if you were to begin your career again in today's world, what would you do?
I would, and it's funny. My son actually works for ThingLogix, and we actually started an internship program down at Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo. And I started when he and several of his buddies were freshmen. And they started coming up, and at that time we were doing IoT and we were working with Amazon. So they have kind of grown up, if you will, doing serverless cloud type computing. Just a couple months ago, one of them asked me, he said, and the guy's a brilliant programmer, and he's, the architect behind a lot of the stuff that we do. But he said, what exactly is a server? What's an on-prem server? I thought, this is now where we're starting. So to begin, and the kids coming out of college today, I always say, yeah, it's, I would start in the cloud. I would start where we are kind of going, and whether that is, Salesforce consulting, whether that's AWS or Azure or Google, any of that stuff, but all of that cloud kind of computing, that's where I would start today, because that I think is just the upside. There's still a lot of, I did mainframe computing, and there's a statistic out there that I'm not sure that some incredible percentage of data is still processed by mainframes and COBOL programs, and a lot of that still exists, but that's not where you want to be. That's not where I don't know what's going to happen when all those gray-haired guys coding, ZOS on IBM mainframes. What happens to them, and where's that code go? But it's the future of computing. I believe is cloud.
Yes. And what career objectives are you currently focusing on?
I am focusing on staying off of the bleeding edge. For the last part of my career, and I've been doing this a long time, and I've always, like I say, I've always wanted to be out there. For the last part of my career, I want to be just shy of the bleeding edge. I want to be just hanging back and let somebody else kind of, forge those paths and, pick up on, kind of where that sweet spot is. So, but that's for me, and where I'm at in my career.
Yeah.
I would still think, I had a buddy of mine, he's just coming out. His son, he asked me that. He goes, "What should I do?" And one of the things that I told him, I go, "I have failed more times in my life than I have succeeded." And I said, "You're young," and I go, "You have got at least 10 or 15 failures in you between now and when you have to retire. So, take the chance. And you want to go to a startup and you want to see how it's going to go, and you have a passion for what they're doing. You have time to fail, and you have time to recover. So, but for me in my career, I'm tired, so I'm going to hang just back
Yeah.
of the edge."
I think that's good advice about failure. And it's about stretching your capabilities, isn't it?
Is,
And
yeah,
being a little bit uncomfortable in what you
yeah,
do, but trying different things as
yeah,
well. And you never know which one of those potential failures will actually succeed.
exactly. And what one, and maybe it's
Yeah.
not necessarily, and in programming, the negative condition is a lot of times more powerful than the positive condition. So finding out what you don't like and finding out that I don't like to do this thing or I don't like to do that is probably at least is more valuable than finding, oh, well, I love this. And when I even in consulting, people say, okay, well, when you come and help us, and I say, I will tell you what not to do. I'm never the guy who can say this is exactly what you're supposed to do and you've got to go down that way. But I can keep you from going off the rails because I know where to go. So I know more about what not to do than I know what to do. But a lot of times that is as valuable, if not more valuable.
It is indeed. And what's the number one non-technical skill that has helped you in your career so far?
Ranching. I I would say that and I've been ranching, my whole life, and it is, and there's always, and I say that kind of tongue in cheek, but it truly is a balance. And I will sit and I will code or architect or design something in the office, and then at some point, I guess I just get exhausted, right? And you get tired, and there's the adage that most of the great ideas happen when you're asleep or something. And so I will every day, I do my ranch chores. I get up at 5 and I'll do ranch chores till probably 7, and then I'm in the office from 7 till probably 4 or 5, and then I got evening chores I got to do. But it's that time when you're away from it. It's that time when you're doing, completely away, that you can really problem solve. Really, when you relax a little bit, and the answers and the solutions kind of flow. And when you're trying to force it, it's so hard, and you make bad decisions. So that ability to go out and whether I'm, changing water or herding cows or loading cows in or out or calving or what have you, it's those, it's a time when it is my time to really kind of contemplate what's going on. And I noticed that,
Yeah.
there's a lot of tech guys. I've noticed that, there's a lot of tech guys that have these hobbies. They're usually, there's a lot of musicians. You find a lot of programmers that are musicians. A lot of them do woodworking or metalworking or some kind of skill with their hands that keeps them out of their head for a little bit. And I think that any of those non-technical skills are will actually enhance your technical abilities.
Absolutely. Yeah, very good advice. And what do you do to keep your own career energized?
Well, that's a good question, and I don't know that I would recommend this to everybody because it is exhausting. But I'm always researching and looking for the next thing. Um, we have one of the other things that we started to come out with at ThingLogix was I believe SMS messaging. I said earlier, I think email's dead, and I don't think we should ever send another email ever. SMS and text messaging and any of those types of messaging, I think, is a new thing. And I started using text messaging, to communicate with my customers in my little beef business, and realized that, oh my God, it is so much more effective, than email. I can get better answers, I get better responses. So I started looking for another. We started developing another company called Chirply that we built on top of our technology that does SMS messaging. But really, that thing that excites you and that keeps you energized is that time when you are away from it and you have a little bit of time to kind of think and dream for a little bit, and you come up with another idea. Now, my problem is I
Yeah.
follow every idea I get, and I shouldn't, but it does keep that energy and excitement going.
Exactly. Yes. And I know the next question you probably answered already, but I want to ask it anyway because there may be a little bit more for you to share. So, what do you do in your spare time away from technology?
Yeah, I'm on the ranch,
Yep.
100%. Yeah, 100% of the time. Yeah, so it's our little town here, and I'm in Bend, Oregon, and we have a lot of breweries here. So uh, we actually pick up spent grains from the breweries and we feed that to the cows. So as a rancher, I'm pretty involved in the community. I'm involved with water conservation, and water is a big deal for all of us, and especially ranchers, but everybody in general, obviously. But so I'm involved in that. But it's fixing fence and it's doing anything else on the ranch that needs to be done.
Yeah. We're getting towards the end of the interview now, but Rob, can you share a parting piece of career advice?
I always, like I was saying, I always consider myself the guy who knows what not to do more than I know what to do. Um, but I guess I would say I would follow up on that statement. Um, I think a lot of times what happens in your career is everybody's, and I've seen this in my own kid's life as well. What am I going to do for the rest of my life? What do I want be my career to be? And they feel like you have to solve that problem. A lot of times I think, well, I went to school and I got a degree in electrical engineering, but I don't like it. Um, or I got a degree in this, and even when picking the degree, it's like this big pressure on you that says, what you're going to do for the rest of your life. And I think the parting piece of advice is saying, you don't, get rid of that question. Get rid of the idea of saying, what am I going to do, as if it is a permanent long thing. What you need to do is be more fluid. Try it. If you find something that interests you, I don't care if it's. I have one of my sons. He's a technologist. The other son, he liked cooking. He said, "Well, I don't know if I can make a living." I go, "Doesn't really matter. Go try it." Yeah, he found out he loves cooking, but he hates trying to cook for a living. So there's those things, and it's okay. It is okay for you to say, you know what, I'm going to try this, and it's okay for you not to like it and go do something completely different. So, I guess the big piece is, don't get caught up in that what I'm going to have to do for the rest of my life or the next 10 years. No, it's what you're going to have to do today and tomorrow, maybe next week or this month and maybe this year. But it's not the entire life that you have to do this, and that
No.
sometimes takes the pressure off.
Yeah. And Rob, where can we find out more about you and connect with you?
So I'm on LinkedIn. Would love to connect. Yes, and ThingLogix has a website. I think I have an email address, but like I say, I don't look at it very much. You can connect with me on LinkedIn and Twitter and Facebook and all the regular social medias as well.
Great. Rob, thank you so much for joining me on the podcast today. It's been great chatting with you.
Thanks, Bill. I really appreciate you having us.
Hi, Phil here again. Well, I hope you enjoyed my conversation with today's guest. You can find full show notes on the website at itcareerenergizer.com/e and the number of the episode you've been listening to. If you haven't already subscribed to the show, please make sure that you do so that you get episodes automatically downloaded to your device every Monday. Thanks for listening and have a great week.
Thanks for listening to the IT Career Energizer podcast. To find out more about building a successful career in IT, visit itcareerenergizer.com.